I'd like to call to order the regular city council meeting of Tuesday, June 9th to order, our first council meeting of June. Just to acknowledge that we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The city of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that the presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. Are there any additions to the agenda today, Ms. Winner?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration does not have any amendments to the agenda this evening. Thank you.
Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Councillor Daniluk. All in favor, raise your hands, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried unanimously. Today we have two items on the consent agenda. So I propose that, I move that council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. Item 5A, regular council meeting minutes of May 26, 2020. And item 10A, Councillor vanNieuwkerk's report. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item 8B in the minutes doesn't show which councillor moved it. So I just wondered if that's worth exempting that from the consent agenda, just to fix that.
Ms. Winner.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Do we need to exempt that from the consent agenda, or can we just amend the minutes?
We can, procedurally, we can do that when we come under item 5A. We can adopt those minutes and with the amendment.
Okay, so we will exempt item 5A from the consent agenda. Councillor Hendricks, discussion?
Nothing further.
Further? All right. All in favor of the amended motion, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Thank you. We have, as far as I know, no members registered for the open forum.
Thank you, Your Worship. We don't have any registrations for the open forum.
Which brings us to item 5A, regular council meeting minutes of May 26th, with the amendment from Councillor Barnhart to add in the mover. So one item.
So moved, Your Worship.
Discussion on the motion. All in favor, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We have no public hearings tonight, and there are no current registered presentations on our agenda this evening, which brings us to item 8A, Clearwater Cemetery Study. Who from administration would like to take this one on?
That would be me, Your Worship. Paul Suter, Director of Community Services. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Subject tonight is the Clearwater Cemetery Study, and the recommendation administration will be making this evening is that council receive and accept the Clearwater Cemetery Study for information purposes at this time. I also have Mr. Grant Tolley. I'm not sure if he's in the waiting room still, but Ms. Winner can bring him in when need be.
We got him.
Okay, I can't see him there. That's great. So the background on this, go back to 2016, Beaumont District Heritage Society had submitted a request for some funds in order to do an upgrade at the Clearwater Cemetery. And I believe the funds were secured based on a matching grant, which they were not able to get. So in 2017, the budget was passed for the $30,000 and has been sitting in a reserve carried forward each budget year. Then in 2018, a decision was made to change the scope of what that fund, or those funds were for. And they wanted to do a comprehensive study of the Clearwater Cemetery as a strategic document for not only today, for operations, as well as for the future. So that study has been completed, and that's what we're here this evening with. The study provides a comprehensive picture of the creation, ownership, usage, and development of the cemetery in order that the value to the city and the surrounding region as a significant historical resource is understood. The study details current functions and planning options for future expansion. The study makes 7 recommendations, which cover maintenance operations, future planning options for growth. Each of these recommendations are sufficiently detailed to assist administration in taking short-term action as well as aid in future budgetary and planning exercises. The 7 recommendations, number 1 would be to prepare a historical treatise, conduct additional research. Number 2, actions to identify and protect the historic portion and erect interpretive signage. Number 3, review of the access to the cemetery as a risk mitigation exercise. Number 4 would be to increase parking at the site. Number 5 would be planning to address future expansion. 6, review of the landscape to enhance beautification. And 7, update maintenance plans. This report will provide strategic direction required to address the immediate and longer term concerns for the operation of the cemetery. And administration will work from this study in both the short term and long term goals. It also ties back to the strategic pillar of livability, as well as our place of play, recreation parks and facilities master plan service delivery, which identifies the need for the cemetery study and future growth planning. So any questions that council would have of Min or Mr. Tully, we'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation tonight. I know I have read the document and it's very, very comprehensive and charts a really clear way forward. There's some decisions that are going to have to be made over the medium to long term as to the future of that facility. But all in all, it provides a really great roadmap forward. I'll open it up to questions from members of council. Councillor Hendricks.
Yes, Your Worship, more just for accolades. This is certainly a fantastic piece of work that was done on this. The backgrounder, the historical review, and really what I would consider a lot of heavy work, heavy lifting to get it to this point. So fantastic. So thank you to all those who contributed, and also just a shout out to Mr. Terry O'Flynn for his advocacy way back in the day when the cemetery was in need of some physical help, and he was part of the group that also got the fence built and some other things. So I want to publicly just acknowledge Mr. O'Flynn, and I'll also hand deliver a copy of this document to his place of business. Thank you.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, accolades as well. I like seeing this this plan. My question is around timelines and budgetary considerations, because we're only seeing at this point the recommendations. Would it be the administration's next steps to bring anything back in more detail? And when about would that be?
Sure.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Barnhart. Yes, some of the recommendations are operational in nature, like updating maintenance plans, reviewing landscape. Some of that stuff we can do almost immediately in the short term. Anything for budget we would see for 2021 if it was around that. But some of the heavier stuff on there is longer term planning, which requires access, parking, future growth and expansion, and they would be evaluated in the future.
So just if I may, Your Worship, follow up. So essentially what is here, you could get started on within existing budgetary allowances, and you would bring back anything that would be extra for council's consideration at next budget time.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Just a quick question, Mr. Suter. Again, as everyone said, a great report. One question I do have is that I don't know the depth of all the people in our various departments. We have a lot of great people in various areas of our administration. The report does talk about engaging a landscape architect to do some revamping of the property. Is there any, do we have the ability in our own staff to do that ourselves? Just a quick question as opposed to farming that out for additional cost. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but I'm wondering if we have the depth of talent within our own ranks to do some of that ourselves possibly. Just a thought. Thank you.
If I may, through Your Worship to Councillor Danlock, we don't have a landscape architect within staff. However, we've got some planning folks that are really good at stuff like that. So we could get a start on it, but anything more detailed and maybe more complex would have to probably be farmed out.
Okay, thank you. I just want to engage our own people as much as we possibly can. We got a lot of very talented people in our administration. So thank you.
Okay, seeing no further hands raised, I'd like to just acknowledge Mr. Tully. Thank you for being here with us tonight. It's a testament to the great document that we didn't have a whole lot of in-depth questions for you, but I do really appreciate you being here just in case. Is there a member of council willing to move acceptance of this, move the recommendation? Councillor Danlock? So moved. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 And Mr. Tully, just as we close off, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak if you wished, since you were here. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Oh, I don't know that I have a lot to say, just that I'm grateful that council and administration saw the value in having this report prepared. I think what it did for everyone involved, both the Heritage Society and for you, is that it raised the awareness of the nature of this, I think, a very important historical resource in our community. And I think that's the real value of the report, is that we all have a better understanding going forward of the value of that facility.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Once again, appreciate your time. And that brings us to item 8B, Beaumont Transit Update and Recommendation. Who will speak?
I will. Good evening, Your Worship, Council, and members of the public. My name is Jennifer Boso-Hudak, and I'm the Director of Operations for Beaumont. This evening, we would like to revisit the transit service in light of the current pandemic state. If you recall, in April, Council directed administration to temporarily suspend Beaumont service effective May 4th, and that we were to revisit the situation at today's meeting. At that time, Council was very clear that we find alternate methods to assist residents if we suspend the transit service. It was through Councillor Stout who connected us with Drive Happiness to fulfill the transportation requirements for these Beaumont residents. Drive Happiness has been able to provide support to our residents during the suspension. A sincere thank you for their service during this pandemic. To revisit the suspension of our transit service, administration gathered information from our regional partners. This information can be found on attachment 1 of this document. As you will note, each municipality has very different schedules, ridership use, fares, and COVID-19 measures in their own relaunching strategies. Today, administration recommends to continue the temporary suspension of Beaumont transit services until stage 3 of the provincial relaunch strategy is in place, with the intention of directing residents to Drive Happiness for any transportation needs during our continued suspension. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the report and appreciate the comprehensive background on what's going on. I'll ask the first question. In light of phase 2 being moved up faster, does that change the recommendation at all, or?
Right now, it depends on, we're working through that strategy. We'll have a better idea before the end of the week. We have some meetings set up for tomorrow to discuss that. So at this point, no.
Okay, appreciate that. Open it up for questions from members of council. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Boso-Hudak, is that?
Correct.
To reiterate and to follow on with that a little bit, I noticed that not only was phase 2 moved up today, but also that some of the phase 3 recommendations got pushed into phase 2. If I ask you the same question, I suspect your answer is going to be the same, right? Is that you'll need to evaluate whether or not that has any effect.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any? Is there any proposed or date for phase 3, or any clue at all as to when we might be moving to phase 3?
I'm going to defer that to CAO Mike.
Thanks, Jennifer. Just further to what Jennifer said, we're basing a lot of the recommendation on the phase 3, specifically around the institutions. When we see the universities and such open up, we think that that's going to be the bulk of our ridership. So we don't have a date for phase 3, but if they were to move those types of activities up, I think we'd have a different recommendation. But as Jennifer said, we're just doing the analysis now. We're just starting to get the details.
Okay, thank you. Follow up?
Sure.
I guess then the next thing I want to consider is what's our lead time? How quickly from deciding that we're going to re-implement the service to actually doing it can we go, because some of these are very quick moving targets, right?
At this time, we've actually reached out to our transit provider, a service provider, and they've indicated typically they would go a month, but we could get away with 2 weeks, but we're working with them diligently on that, knowing full well that they have to schedule their manpower. So it may be working a little bit. So I'm going to say right now, we're a 2 to 4 week lead time. But they've been very accommodating to date, and we've been working well with them to get things moving quicker, as well as when we did the suspension, they required typically a 30-day. We were able to get it in less than a week. So they've been very accommodating. We'll continue to get that. Unfortunately, I don't have a concrete time frame for you yet.
No, understood, and I didn't really expect to have, but thank you. I just want to get some feel. It's not something we can switch on tomorrow if we decide to suspend. Well, really what I'm coming to is if we decide to suspend for another month, then it's going to be difficult to change that if circumstances change before the end of the month.
I'd agree. Yep. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further requests to speak, is there a member of council permitted to remove the recommendation that we continue to defer or to continue to have the temporary suspension of Beaumont transit service until stage 3 of the provincial relaunch strategy? I saw Councillor Hendrick's hands. Were you moving the motion?
Yes.
So moved. Discussion on the motion?
No.
Seeing none? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 That carries unanimously. Which brings us to item 8C, Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program Grant. Who from administration will take this one on?
That's me, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council and members of the public. I am Keaton Seavey. I'm Beaumont's Manager of Innovation and Technology. Today, I am looking for direction from council to proceed with applying for a grant through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program. That is a mouthful. There we go. The FCM recently released a grant that fits perfectly with our road condition assessments project, which was approved in the 2020 capital budget. As also with part of the grant application, I'm also looking for a resolution from council committing to the existing road condition assessment 2020 capital budget. Be happy to answer any questions from anyone, Your Worship.
Okay, seeing that. So you're looking for 2 separate motions?
I'd have to defer to Shalane and how we're able to do it technically.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Nsivi, we do require the 2 motions, and both of the motions are listed in the agenda. And that is a requirement of the FCM grant application.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of council on this? For me, it seems to be pretty straightforward. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just if I may, I'm looking at the package right now. I don't see a second motion. I'm not saying it's not there. Can you just tell me where it is, Ms. Winter, please, so I can look at it again? I do think there's 2 motions here. If I'm seeing council response options, the council resolves and directs administration to apply for the grant. I don't see a second motion. Am I missing something, please?
It's up in the recommendation. Go to the back to the top of the page.
Okay, sorry. I must have read that twice and didn't realize. Okay, I apologize for that. Thank you very much.
I got to admit, councillor had the same question. That's why I asked 2 motions, because that's where I was when I found it.
Perfect. Thank you. Second question is, I know we're asking the coming administration is coming to council to ask permission to apply for the grant, but I guess is that a procedural thing for us to do? I mean, why wouldn't we want to apply for the grant? Is it more procedural to come to council just so we know for the future?
Thank you, Your Worship. The big difference here is that the FCM requires a resolution from council to commit to the project. So in this case, it's already an approved 2020 capital project. So I agree, it seems a bit redundant, but in general, the grant application part of it is the resolution. So that requires us to come to council.
More of a housekeeping kind of item basically for us. Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify. That's what I thought it was. Thank you very much.
Great. So seeing no No further requests to speak. I'll move the first one, that council direct administration to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program for the road condition assessment project to the maximum value of 80% of the $58,000 that council has already approved and committed to in the 2020 operating budget. Discussion on the motion.
Nope.
Seeing none. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 There a member of council willing to move that council resolves to commit to completing the road condition assessment project, which will advance our asset management program. This will be submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program as part of the grant application. Councillor Barnhart.
So moved, your worship.
Again.
Yep.
We were playing there.
Yeah, these are hard. All right. Discussion on the motion.
No.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brings us to item 11, CAO's update. Oh, sorry, I missed 10. Councillor inquiries and reports. We'll go with inquiries first, then reports. So are there questions of administration from members of council? Councillor Danlock, followed by
Thank you,
Councillor.
Worship. If I may ask our CEO for a possible update or a progress report, if you will, on the reserve study being conducted by our CFO, Mr. Dowler. Thank you.
And you can unmute me. Oh, thank you. Just double checking here to see if Mr. Dowler is on. No, he's not. I spoke with him today, and he's progressing actually quite well on the study, and it is coming back to council. I may have the wrong date, but it's the first meeting in July,
Okay.
and we'll present it. July, I'm going to say 14th or something. Don't quote me. One of the first meeting in July.
Great. That sounds very good. Thank you very much. Second question, if I may.
You may, go ahead.
Very brief, thank you. You just got a text from one of the citizens in town, so I was going to ask them to put the request to his service report, but they did ask about the Lions RV Park. I guess in the past there's been a porta potty there for patrons to use. It's not there at this point. I'm wondering if that may be coming up in the future. No need for an answer right now. Just maybe put on your radar for a future service situation.
Well, actually, I can provide you with an answer. At this point in time, due to the public health restrictions, we're not putting out any porta potties. The cleaning protocols are too strict. However, we are assessing that every day. So I would assume once those get lifted that we'll be putting them out. But that's the only thing that's preventing us from doing that right now.
That's what I assumed. Thank you very much. I'll pass on to that person individually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Sout.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Stewart, I believe Council asked for a report on the future of a police excellence review, and I was which would also address the question of whether or not the RCMP was offering the town the best policing option available to us. Has work commenced on that report? And if so, is there any possible date for a presentation to Council?
Sure. I've gone back and looked at the records. When you talked about the assessment on whether we were using RCMP or some other form of policing, I didn't see any record of that. What I did see is in 2018, the police excellence review, there was $35,000 approved in the budget. Now, maybe I made an error here, but it did not get forwarded. It did not become part of the 2020 budget when we were looking at opportunities to reduce. And after some discussions amongst council about the policing, I had assumed the issue was taken care of, was no longer on the priority list. So I didn't advance that as far as the 2020 budget is concerned.
Yeah, we did have one discussion in camera about policing that sort of muddied the waters. And so I can see how this sort of went. And so I'm like Councillor Stout, if we want to bring that back, and I'd be more than happy to have that conversation because I think it's a worthwhile conversation. I think CAO, correct me if I'm wrong, we need a little direction from members of council.
If you would like to further this discussion, what I would recommend is that we could bring back a report to a committee of the whole, again, outlining what we understood the policing review was going to cover. And you can make that decision there, or we wait till next year's budget.
So I'll ask members of Councillor Stout, since this is your question. Sorry, I jumped in, but would that
It's
be
okay.
bring it back to a committee of the whole, and would the rest of council approve that?
That would be my desired outcome, yes.
And so I guess want to move a quick motion to bring that back to a committee of the whole for discussion?
Would I like to do that?
Please.
Yes, certainly. I'd like to move that we bring a police excellence report back to committee of whole for discussion.
Okay. And is that okay with council, or do we do that as a notice of motion and put it off till next week? Okay, members of council. Good, yes.
No, can I ask?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, my question would be surrounding the terms of reference for that document. I think it's
that's what the discussion at committee of the whole would be to scope that terms of reference and decide if we even wanted to do that project.
right. So I think we had the conversation once, and discussion was held, and a decision was made. But if we want to bring it back, I think we have to be very careful that we frame this thing up properly in terms of its terms of reference.
I completely concur.
Excuse me if I could add, I'm not even sure we got so far as to develop a terms of reference. So going back to the budget, unfortunately, back in 2018 or 17, 2018, we weren't recording the budget workshop, nor were we making specific motions for each item, which was what we are doing now. So I will go back and find out what was presented to council that led to the decision at budget to pursue this. And then I think the next step would probably have been terms of reference. I don't think we got that far.
Yeah, and I'm not expecting a terms of reference at the committee of the whole. I would, and Councillor, but this is largely a discussion around, do we want to do the project and what the terms should be. All right, all those in favor to bring that item back to a committee of the whole for discussion, raise your hand, say aye.
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 All those opposed? That carries 6-1. Councillor Stout, further questions?
No, that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if I could get an update from the CAO on the market that is going to be taking place in Centreville. I know that the word is out. I'm wondering if we are actually running that market as the city, or if that's being run by another organization, and if they need any assistance with any promotion on that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnhart. I'm going to defer that to Mr. Mackin. Rob?
Thank you, CAO Mike. And to your question, Councillor Barnhart, that is actually the same organization that planned the Centreville market for the last 2 years that had normally taken place on Sundays. So that has become a separate standalone organization, community-based, community-run. They have a new person this year coordinating it on their behalf. But we worked with them early on this season, pre-COVID, and suggested that a Thursday evening might draw a better crowd and interest both from vendors and the public. As we know, Beaumont in the summer on weekends tends to empty out at times. So they loved that idea, discussed it with some of their potential vendors at that time. Then COVID occurred, so it's taken some time to get up and running. But at this time, my last discussion, they're looking at about 7 to 8 vendors for the initial market. And we are planning to support them as we have in the past.
So then, if I may, Your Worship, follow up, are we helping them with any advertising on the city website or anything like that? Because if there's anything that I know, you didn't know, look on the Centreville website, you wouldn't know that market was happening. So we're just wanting to get the word out so home-based businesses and others will have a chance to sell their wares.
Thank you for that, Councillor Barnhart. What I will do is definitely reach out to the market directly and make that offer to them to assist them where and however we can. At this time, they haven't asked that, but you've got a lot of experience in that area, so I appreciate your input.
Thank you.
All right, I see no further hands from members of council wishing to ask questions. Are there members of council wishing to make a statement this evening?
No.
All right, so seeing none, we'll move on to CAO's update.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council, members of the public. Just quickly go over some of the new information we received today from Alberta Health. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. We did a pretty extensive update on Thursday. What we found is exactly what we expected on Thursday. It occurred today, and that's a whole bunch of moving parts. So we're going to be activating the full-time. The ECC is going to be moving full-time here for the next several days to get plans in place. A footnote, today we have now recorded 4 new and active cases in Beaumont. We have done an exceptional job and have been extremely lucky through this whole pandemic. I don't think that changes anything, but I do think it's a gentle reminder that we're still in this, and our folks need to abide by the public health orders, specifically or especially minimum distancing. Today, the province announced stage 2 startup. A little history, March 17th, the public health emergency was declared. The province is going to allow that to lapse on June 15th. Premier Kenney was clear today that he said just because the public health emergency lapses does not change the fact that the orders remain in place. And we talked about that a little bit on Thursday. On May 14th, the province implemented their stage 1. That was about 3 weeks ago. And now today they have declared that stage 2 will begin on Friday, June 12th. Very clear, the minimum distancing requirement for the public health order remains in effect. Some of the highlights of stage 2 was reopening of K-12 diploma and summer school, diploma exams in summer schools, opening with libraries, more surgeries, most personal services are opening, movie theaters will be allowed to operate. All of these things under specific orders, and a lot of that information is not out yet. There's a number of other things. Indoor gatherings is still up to 50 people. Outdoor events can go up to 100 people. Again, all this data is on our website, and I had sent you the link. The stage 3 items that were moved forward are now included into stage 2, include things like indoor recreation, gyms, pools, and arenas. Again, all under public health orders, and we're still waiting to receive that information. The Premier talked about the 3 significant triggers that allowed us to move to stage 2. And one of those was, if you recall, they sent that dashboard out several weeks ago and set the targets. But one of those triggers was the amount of COVID hospitalizations, and they needed to decrease or increase by no more than 5% over a 3 consecutive week period. We have hit that target. The ICU beds in the province, this is the second trigger, could not occupy more than 50% of the beds available in the province. And currently, I believe there are 5 beds in the province. And the active cases. So they were looking at a threshold, which was around, we were at 355 yesterday. So all 3 of those things is what led the province to decide to open to stage 2. What we didn't hear today, but we are told that there will be further information coming this week. Minister Schultz is going to be meeting and Child Services Ministry folks. So they're working with Dr. Henshaw to share the childcare specifics, which we're expecting later this week. If you remember, I reported last week that there is a threshold on where our early learning childcare can continue to operate within the policy. We're still pretty confident that we're going to be able to give those numbers, but we will keep you posted. And again, we're hoping to get more information later this week. So that's all I've got for an update. I've opened any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll open it up to questions specific to COVID if members of council have any questions on that today. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. There's no correspondence. Do members of, sorry, did I hear?
Oh, sorry, just me, sorry.
Okay. Do any members of council have a notice of motion today? Okay, seeing none, I do have one. I have a notice of motion that council direct administration to work collaboratively with the city of Leduc to draft options for various regional initiatives, which could include the provision of services or memorandums of understanding that may be beneficial to both parties to be brought back for respective council's consideration. So we'll bring that back to the next meeting. Next items are in closed session. So we'll go into closed session, then we'll take a 5-minute break while we reset, and then we'll carry on with items 4A, B, and C. Can I get a member of council to move us to go into closed session? Councillor Stout? All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
We'll take a quick 5-minute break while we move into closed session and reset. So welcome back, members of the public. We've completed our in-camera session. We have one item arising out of our in-camera sessions, item 14C, contract negotiations. I'd like to call on Councillor Daniluk to make that motion.
Could that motion be read by Shalane, please?
Sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the members of the public and council. The motion reads that Councillor Daniluk direct Mayor Stewart to sign the amended CAO contract with the terms agreed to in the closed session.
I so move. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Since we already had the discussion on the motion, all in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously. And there being no further items on tonight's agenda, that brings this council meeting to a close. And we now stand adjourned, and we'll see everybody as we go. Once again, thanks everybody for your hard work.
Thank you so much.
We'll go from there.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks very much.